Okay, so here's part 2 to dividing decimals. We're going to talk about dividing decimals by decimals. So here are a few steps. So whenever you're on your own, you're doing your homework, you're working on your classwork, these are the 3 steps you want to look back when refreshing your mind and memory on how to do this. Number 1 is if the divisor has a decimal, move it to the end of the number. That's the number on the outside of the box, the divisor. Then move the decimal in the dividend the same amount of times. Finally, bring the decimal straight up from the dividend to the quotient. Okay, so here we have our divisor of 2 5/10. We do not want to divide by decimals. We want it to be a whole number. So in order to make 2 5/10 a whole number into 25, we move this decimal one time over to the right. So however many times we move the divisor is how many times we're going to move the dividend. So I moved 2.5 to 25, moving it over once. I'm going to move 7.5 the same amount of times one time, making it 75 and bringing it straight up into the quotient. So now I'm dividing a number by a whole number instead of a number by a decimal. And if it makes it easier for you, once you do that, you could take 25, since we moved that decimal out of the way, and 75, put your decimal back there so we know that a decimal exists, and bring it straight up. And then you can solve the problem from here, or you can use the original platform. That's up to you. So number 1 says to find the quotient 18 45/100 divided by 5/10. So here we have 18 45/100 divided by 5/10. So we are dividing by a decimal. So our rule says to take this decimal, let's use a different color, maybe we could see it. Take this decimal and move it over however many times necessary to make it into a whole number. So I move it over one time, and that makes it into a 5. What I do is to the divisor, I do to the dividend. So I move this decimal over one time as well. So it's in between the 4 and the 5 now, and I bring it straight up into my quotient. And now I divide like normal. So here I have 5 goes into 1 0 times. 5 goes into 18 3 times. 3 times 5 is 15. 18 minus 15 is 3. Bring down your 4. 5 goes into 34 6 times. 6 times 5 is 30. 34 minus 30 is 4. Don't worry about that decimal, ignore it. Bring down the 5, and 5 goes into 45 9 times. 9 times 5 is 45. 45 minus 45 is 0. So this answer is 36 9/10. Moving on. This one is fraction notation as division. That means that basically this line is divided by. So we have 5 2/10 over 800, or we have 5 2/10 divided by 800. So we can say that 2 different ways. So 5 2/10 divided by 0.08. So now we want to move the decimal over however many times necessary to make that divisor a whole number. So that means if I move it over once, that's still not a whole number, so I've got to move it over twice. When I do the divisor, I do the dividend. So I move it over once. Even though there's no place value here, I need to move it over twice because it's got to match. And I add a 0 as my filler in. So then I want to expand that so I can bring my decimal straight up into the quotient. And then divide like normal. I want you to go ahead and press pause and try to finish dividing this, and we'll see what you come up with. Okay, so you should have gotten 65 for this answer. If you didn't get it, again, press pause and find your mistake. And let's move on to the next one. So on this one, I actually want you to press pause at the beginning, and I want you to try to set this up and ready to divide. So set it up and do whatever you need to do with the decimals. Press play when you have finished. Okay, so you should have moved the decimal one time over in the dividend and one time over in the divisor, moving the decimal in between the two fours. Again, I want you to press pause and complete this on your own. Press play when you have finished. You should have gotten 93 4/10. I would like you to do this problem on your own. Remember, we do not want to divide by decimals. It gets a little sticky when you do that. So that's the purpose of moving the decimals over. What you do to the divisor, you have to do to the dividend. We will check this tomorrow with our table groups. Our last problem is a word problem. It says a minion spent $7.11 on banana sundaes. If he spent 79 cents on each banana sundae, how many banana sundaes did he buy? So that means we have to take $7.11 and divide it by 79 cents, and that's going to give us how many bananas he bought. Again, I want you to do this one on your own, and we will check it tomorrow with our table groups.